Welcome to the High Tea with Grace podcast, where we spill the tea on HIT. Today, I'm honored to welcome to the pod Virginia Halsey, SVP of Strategy and Product Management at FDB. Thanks for joining me today, Virginia.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this. This is fun.
Me too. This is so fun. So tell me, how is next generation medication decision support evolving to become more actionable and patient specific?
Well, one fundamental piece is that it's important to organize around the risk to the patient rather than the type of medication issue. So typically you see, oh, this drug interacts with this drug, or this drug is a duplicate with this drug. And what it really needs to be, and what the newer medication CDS does, is organize around the risk to the patient. So what is the potential clinical consequence that we're worried about, such as QT prolongation, bleeding, or nephrotoxicity? And then what do we need to do about it? Is there an alternative drug? Is there an alternative dose? That kind of thing. Another piece is that we leverage patient data that has not always been so easy to take advantage of. So things like labs, medication history, conditions, risk score, even genomics at this point. And then importantly, intervening at the right point in the workflow is so important. So instead of always kind of alerting when a physician is writing an order, for instance, getting into the workflow in other places. So for instance, maybe the physician is in the med list and they need to make changes for pre-op. Supporting them there with efficiencies rather than having them do things manually, figure out which drugs need to change, how they need to change. Same thing for like IV to PO or post-op even. And in those cases, having the content really support the physician so that they can just make the change and not have to dig around, look in different places.
That makes so much sense. And how is AI and advanced analytics improving prescription safety, efficacy in this whole endeavor?
Yeah. So one of the ways we've been using AI for a while is to interpret free text prescriptions. So in other words, it says, take methotrexate once a week, 5 milligrams, that kind of thing. And that has not always been easy to interpret, but what we've been doing for some time is using AI and machine learning to interpret that into codified, meaningful information that then we can translate into a number of different languages. And also we can calendarize, if that's a word, for an easy schedule and easy instructions for the patient, very specific to that SIG, that prescription. So that there have been studies. San Francisco General did a study and saw that medication adherence improved with that kind of support. And the VA did a study that showed that patients could understand their meds better. So that's been something we've been doing for a while. And now with generative AI, it's a whole nother level because we're reaching such high proportion of prescriptions that we can translate that way. Another example is newer. So at this point, we're now working with AI agents to collect data as inputs from sources that have not always been so accessible or that have been unstructured. So for instance, take the example of pharmacists verifying pharmacy orders. Depending on the size of the organization, you may have pharmacists verifying hundreds, or even for a large organization, thousands of orders day in and day out. And what these agents do is go out and collect all the information that's needed and serve it up right there at the point where it's needed. So, for example, it's Tylenol. There's so many Tylenol orders. And what you can do is now with these tools is go into the MAR, the medication administration record, see how many of the PRN orders have actually been given, and then report on an accurate, in the moment dose to help the pharmacist make a very quick decision. So accessing that information and accessing information that was buried in physician notes or nursing notes in the past is another example.
Wow, who would have seriously thought this 10 years ago even? The future is here and we're on it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what are some of the challenges health systems are now facing with these advanced offerings in terms of implementing these sophisticated decision support tools? And how can you balance that automation with clinical oversight?
One issue is the same as what we've faced for a long time, and that is just competing priorities. So if you have a gap in security or you have another hospital to bring up on your EHR, those resources that's what you have to use your resources for. And you might not have the resources available to work on projects that make a big difference in the clinical workflow. However, people are making AI projects a priority when they can. And the challenge then becomes that organizations, healthcare systems have to be focused on responsible use of AI, just because of the nature of clinical work and taking care of patients. This is so fundamentally different than AI choosing which shoes you might like because of your other selections of outfits or whatever. And so a lot of organizations are not necessarily equipped to vet all of the companies that are popping up and coming up with these new models. It's the companies, but it's also the models that they need to be able to verify, and they're not always equipped to do that. So one thing that people have done is turn to the companies that they already trust. That's a key part.
That makes so much sense. It's like, oh, I trust you're doing great AI work here. I trust that you're responsible, that you're vetted, and that you're going to be able to deal with the infrastructure that know what our infrastructure is already and work within that infrastructure.
And you can't just go on trust, but if you start with a company that you trust, and there have been studies that I think it was one of the University of California health systems, they did a deep study on two of the different AI ambient listening programs. So they wound up publishing that, or at least it was presented at AMIA. So you have to dig in, but it starts with the source.
Yeah, interesting. And all that said, how are regulatory and legal considerations playing a role here, and how are they shaping the development of AI-powered medication decision support? And are there any key compliance hurdles that health IT teams have to be aware of?
It's a hackneyed term at this point, but it's all moving so fast. And let's use the example that I mentioned earlier with pharmacy order verification. There's a regulation, a standing regulation not related to AI, that by the Joint Commission, as well as some states, and it requires that almost all orders need to be verified by the pharmacist. So there are some exceptions like the ED, but generally this is what pharmacists are spending an awful lot of their time on. And that's a good thing. However, what we can do is tee up all of that information and then pre-process and say, check, this order meets all of these criteria related to this specific drug and this specific patient, which we've pulled the information on, or it doesn't meet all of it. And here's where it doesn't. So with the Tylenol example, okay, they've already, even though it's PRN, they've already had this dose in the past 24 hours. So actually making it such that there is that human in the loop on the end where the pharmacist is working or where the physician is working. So with ambient listening, you have the physicians need to actually kind of verify what has been captured. It's not magical. It's great. It's a huge improvement. You see improved physician satisfaction, but you also need to verify. And sometimes clinicians they may not want to be an editor. They may not want to do that. So that applies on the end with the end user. And then it also applies for those of us that are providing tools and content. So we use a human in the loop to make sure things are as trusted as our reputation warrants.
It sounds like you're really seeing health systems adopting ambient listening and generative AI tools for physician notes. So what impact is this having on clinician efficiency and burnout from your perspective and from what you're hearing from customers?
Yeah. So we've heard from our customers that there is an increase in satisfaction, and in some cases, these tools are cutting down on pajama time, but it's not magical. People need to get used to the tools. They have to grow to trust them, and they still need to review. So clinicians may not want to be editors. We have heard some cases where the technology was freeing up time to see more patients, but generally we hear more about the increased satisfaction.
That's great to hear. And that's what I'm hearing too, just in the industry. So excited about this innovation and thrilled that hospitals and health systems are adopting it so readily, but then also realizing you still need to have that human in the loop to make sure things are safe and appropriate. And hopefully it will continue to cut down on pajama time. So how do you see AI-powered tools evolving beyond documentation? What are some promising ways they can assist clinicians in completing other actions?
Yeah, so one thing we see is that right now, ambient listening is a lot about the notes, and then people are also focused on billing. But really, the next step is taking action and actually ordering meds in that workflow and then teeing them up into the normal flow of the EHR, but also using the patient information in those notes. So if it says normal EKG, then you have that information when you're looking at drug-drug interactions, for instance, or you have information that will let you serve up the right dose for a medication or alternative dose. So we're really looking forward to getting more information. Something as simple as indication of the drug has been hard to get, and we really look forward to being able to do more sophisticated dosing and suggesting therapeutic alternatives based on that information in the notes.
So interesting. And kind of talking on that point, what are some of the risks and limitations of integrating generative AI in particular into EHR workflows? And how can health systems make sure that they enhance care instead of create new burdens or errors?
Thinking about the limitations, one thing that's going on right now is the response time may not be for these AI tools that sub-second response that's expected in the workflow, like when the physician is actually writing an order and getting back information. That's one area where things are changing, and that may not always be the case, but there are some methods to deal with that where you can serve up the information in kind of chunks as you go. There's also AI checking AI, which is another great approach. Grounding the information so it's only aimed at very specific sources that are trusted. And then it goes back to that human in the loop. And again, that may not always be the case. But at this point, that's really the state of the state.
And if you had to predict the next major breakthrough in AI-driven health IT, what would it be? How do you envision the role of AI and EHRs advancing in 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Yeah. So if you go out 5 years and 10 years, I think one of the big promise is the ability to get real world data out of these systems. And I think that means things like this drug is more effective at this dose in these kinds of patients than this other dose, or this theoretical drug-drug interaction is not really turning out in the data to be something that really happens. It's theoretical. So I think getting at that real-world data is going to be an absolute game changer.
Seems like in the past, pharma and HIT were always separated, and it's very exciting, this bench to bedside and back, and how it could be collaborative to not only improve care, but research. What a great thought, to think that could be.
And that's happening. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So my listeners love to learn about what's going on in the industry, but they also love to learn about from women leaders like yourself, just about themselves and things that they do to work their best and make a difference. So what are some hobbies or things that you have in place or habits that you have that help you work your best?
Okay, so my big hobby is playing tennis. Not good at it, but I work so hard at it. And it's when I'm playing tennis, I'm in the moment. You have to be in the moment. So you get a relief from all of the pressures of your career. And I think my tennis playing really is analogous to the way I work in that I'm scrappy and I am tenacious. And that's how I get the points. And that's how I've always worked, is being really tenacious and just trying to get to that point where not just you're inventing something or, you're using this great new technology, but you get to the point where it's actually implemented out there and people are using it and it's making a difference. So I like to get all the way to that end point where you're seeing the difference.
Absolutely. I love that. And in your career life and personal life, I'm sure you've seen many challenges to get to the point where you are. What are some things that you do when you are in those hard parts of life that just help you keep going and keep you resilient?
Yeah, it's really a matter of just sticking to it. So not to be repetitive, but there are very hard times, and taking a little time to kind of breathe and step back, but then just keep coming at it and really trying to look at it at the end result as opposed to getting wrapped up in taking things personally or kind of getting defeated when something doesn't work. It's to keep going.
If you could give your younger self a piece of advice, what would that be? And it could be personal or professional.
Yeah, I really think it's don't worry so much, because I maybe didn't realize how much that I could bring to the table and always was working so hard. I think having more confidence is really a key there.
I love it. So to finish this conversation off right, where can our listeners find you online?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is probably the easiest place there, Virginia Halsey, and love to hear from people.
Fantastic. Now, before I forget, did you happen to bring tea with you today? And if so, tell me about your mug.
I did.
About your mug. What mug is that?
So I'm actually back in Boston at my homestead, the old homestead. I live in San Francisco. And so I'm at my mom's house, and I took my mom's favorite mug because I didn't bring one with me. And this is it. And it was made by a family friend. And I think it's beautiful. I love the different blues, all the different blues. It's like almost like
handmade with clay and clearly really beautiful. Lots of different blues.
Yeah. It's almost like Picasso's blue period. So
it totally is. It's so great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And thanks for joining us today. It was awesome to learn from you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me. This was really great.
And thanks to you folks for joining us too. Check out the High Tea with Grace podcast for more interviews with great guests like Virginia today. Cheers.
Like a Girl Media is more than a media network. It's a community. We want to meet you and amplify your voice and the voices of outstanding women innovating in healthcare. Interested in starting your own podcast or hosting an event near you? Connect with us online or in person. We're here to support and empower you.